We thank you, and so be it. So welcome, everyone. And today we will be sharing something really interesting that I would like to give some background before we start, as this is a fruit of a God at home or a gospel at home that we were having. About 3 weeks ago, a little over 3 weeks ago, we hold our God at home or gospel at home. For some of you who may not know what that is, it's a moment as we learn in Spiritism where we, as a family group, we sit down on the table or wherever comfortable room we have, quiet, avoid try to avoid any background noise like TV, anything, and we sit down and we open a book and we read a passage, right, that is enlightening, and we talk about it. We say a few words after, and then we pray, and then we ask during that moment that we're all guided, that we're all guarded throughout the week in our each one of us, as well as our homes as well. It is a practice that helps us to calm down, right? Our anxieties, our fears. It helps us prepare to what's coming in the future, and as well as get a better understanding in general of life as well. So we received a message from the book Live in Spring, and the message is message 132, entitled "Being Afraid," right? And then the week after, which was a little over 2 weeks ago, we opened the book randomly again. And guess what? We opened on the same message. And then the person who opened the message said, one of my daughters said, "Oh, should we read another one?" No, read the same one. We don't know why we open randomly the same message. And there we had it. We open again. At that moment, I was thinking, let me pay attention again to the message, because we really need to understand this. And at that moment also, it crossed my mind, because we were preparing for this month, for this talk. And I said, this is it, right? Because in Spiritism also we learn what? We learn through pain or love, right? In between, we have what? The repetition, right? Just many, many times that we learn through love, or the many, many times that we learn through pain as well. And I would add what? When we present something, we tend to remember. It tends to stick to us, right? We're presenting something. So it's like, you know what? Why not? And then there were a couple of things that happened in our family circle that emphasized the idea that we learn through pain. So it was a pre-warning of what was to come, as well as we know, as all the many things that is going on in the world right now, that it starts popping up as well, the different wars, the different excitements that we see on the news as well, which it kind of helps us with this idea of being fearful, right? Of fearing something, either something that has already happened, right? And it may happen again, or perhaps something that hasn't happened yet, and I just fear that it may not go the way I want, right? We were talking earlier today, and tomorrow we're springing forward with our time, right? And many of us were like, "Oh my gosh, I'm gonna lose 1 hour of sleep," right? 1 hour sleep, right? Like you're not gonna be able to go ahead and go to bed earlier and but we fear these things, right? It is normal that we live in the future sometimes. It is normal that we live in the past. And that is one of the elements that we would like to bring to calm ourselves down a little bit, to help ourselves analyze life a little bit different. And then when we have these feelings, right, we know what to do. And I think we already know what to do, right? We talk about prayer, we talk about the different things that we can do. But Emmanuel, as we will see, brings a different perspective, and he ties this message, as you can see, the the excerpt that he takes from the book, from the gospel, is the end of, well, almost the end of the parable of the talents. And we have presented this before here, but we will emphasize a little bit and try to make sense of it. For those of us who may not know, this is one of the books of the Living Spring collection, also entitled Living Spring. And Emmanuel in these books takes an excerpt of the gospel, right? And just talks to us, explains to us his perspective of that passage. He doesn't talk about the whole thing, the whole parable, but emphasizes on this idea of being afraid. Because as we will see, one of the individuals that receives the talents, he feels afraid. He is afraid, right? We're not going to talk about the message yet, okay? Let us do this. Let's bring some elements that we can connect when we read the message, right? Joanna de Angelis in this book, Life's Moral Laws, or the Moral Laws of Life, she shares a couple of things. Well, let me take a step back, and I would like to explain a little bit what this book is. It's an amazing book. I believe they're on the works of translating, right, Daniel, or is it already translated? The Moral Laws of Life. I'm not so sure, and I didn't check on that either, so forgive me for that. But what Joanna de Angelis does, she goes to the third part of the Spirit's book, which is all about the laws, the natural laws. She takes some of the questions, 2 or 3 questions of the natural laws. For example, the law of duration, as we will see here, part of the law of destruction, the law of preservation, which we will see a little bit over today as well. And then she makes little, I would say, short essays, right, explaining to us, or explanations in the matter at hand. In this case here, it's interesting that this passage is not in the part of the book that addresses the law of preservation, but the law of destruction, which is one of the natural laws. In this case here, the message is entitled Considering Fear, right? She says the following: let nothing seem terrifying to you. Life consists of experiences, victorious or not, that provide you with acquisition for balance and wisdom. So she's addressing straight from the point, what here? Our life, the way it happens, right? So if something happened, right, that we were expecting or not happen, guess what? That's part of it, right? Or we also have to take in consideration the fact that is also something that it did not happen. Because sometimes we start then living in the future saying, oh, I tried everything, this or that, I prepared myself, and it didn't happen. So then we start fearing that in the future will be the same thing. Or that it will be another battle just as we were battling before, right? So all of these things we got to take in consideration so that we are not living in the past much on the same way. Therefore, do not suffer in anticipation. Now we're talking about the future, nor allow the ghost of fear to disturb your discernment in the face of useful undertakings, or frighten you, generating unjustified disturbance and apprehension. Take a pause here, because she also continues later on talking about how can this affect ourselves in terms of our perception about the world, right? Our connection with others. So we see all of these things happening, and then there are a plethora of studies nowadays that addresses fear in our lives and how it affects our physical bodies. The discharges of cortisol, right? The discharges of many other elements in our bodies that we just don't know how to deal with. And in some time, and then we at the end of the day, I have this headache, or I feel this, or I'm gaining weight, or I'm losing weight, right? I eat, I don't feel well, right? And we try what? Medicine. Instead of going to the root cause of the problem that is all right here or right here. anticipating things that perhaps will not happen. And if it happens, guess what? It's just life, right? When we fear something, we allow ourselves to be dominated by unknown forces of the personality, which install lamentable processes of nervous dystonia, advancing towards mental derangement. Events are as they occur, and as such, they must be faced. So, I want to make a pause here and say one thing. I'm not a psychologist. I don't have a degree in psychology that I can say to you, don't worry about it. This is normal. It's not normal. And we will see some couple cases that is extremely important in our lives, right? That if you are fearing something, if you're at that level that you cannot take anymore, please go find help, right? It's not something that we should avoid. It's not something that, oh, that's just, some people say, I think you're just, being too much, right? You're being extra. No. So some of us, there are certain things that we cannot deal with it, right? There are certain things that we go through in our lives that is completely different that if another person will go through. And this is a very important point. The level of importance that we put into certain things in our lives is different from the level of importance that others put on their lives. The same way, the importance that any one of you places on a condition or a situation is different the way I will see. We were raised differently, right? We went through different situations in our lives, right? We have way different, right, reincarnations in the past. And I like to add this element because in general, we don't add that. Even us spiritists, we forget about this element of many lives, right? What happened in the past, we don't know. But one thing we know for sure, we fear something at the moment. So where is it from? Where did it happen? Right? The traumatic moments that we had in the past now has an effect. It's happening. It's real, right? However, we bring back again to what Joanna D'Angelo is bringing to us and saying events are as they occur, and as such, they must be faced. Let's not make it bigger than already is, right? Let's not make something else than what it is, right? And let's seek help for sure, right? But this is something natural. The purpose here is not for us to be fearful of feeling fear, right? Of being fearful, right? Of something, but to analyze it. Why do I feel this way? Why is this happening, right? And then there's one caveat to that. We're going to get to that, but we'll see. It's interesting that when we talk about being fearful, right, we look at it as something negative, number one, but it is the different mechanism that we have in our lives already shows to us that this is intrinsic inside of us. Each one of us have this, let us call the stopwatch, right? That there are certain things that each one of us will say, no, I cannot go there, right? Our physical bodies has this beautiful mechanism of homeostasis that regulates everything on us, right? So we want to be in balance. For those of us who love to go to the gym, I'll tell you one thing. Our bodies do not want to go to the gym. It is true. And sometimes we use that as an excuse not to do so because our bodies does not want to struggle. Everything has to be calm, right? Something happens to us. If we feel cold, the body automatically makes us shiver, right? So that we regulate our temperature. If we feel too hot, we start doing what? Sweating. So that it cools down. So it's a beautiful thing. It is this natural, let's read. The tendency of a system, especially the physiological system of higher animals, to maintain internal stability, owing to the coordinated response of its parts to any situation or stimulus that would tend to disturb its normal condition or function. Why we bring this? Because when we think that being fearful is wrong, no, we want to be in this state of calmness. We want to be in this state of less disturbance. But there is something really interesting that studying the idea also came about. Homeostasis through by the this is from the NIH, the National Institute of Health. Homeostasis is the body's automatic, self-regulating process of maintaining a stable, balanced internal environment, temperature, pH, fluid levels, despite changing external conditions. Acting as a biological thermostat, it uses negative feedback loops to detect changes, send signals, and trigger factors to correct imbalances and ensure survival. What caught my attention here is the negative feedback. And this is really interesting because our body is always, okay, is it something wrong? Is there something wrong? Is there something that I have to work on? And then receives that negative and does what? Transform into something positive. And I went into this loop. It's the technology is amazing, right? I went into this loop as well of learning about technology in general, right? If you have a car now that is that can drive by itself, or even if with the new technology right now, some of the cars they can regulate, they can see through the camera, right? They have a camera and they will see the line as you start to going out of the lane, the car regulates. So it receives a negative impulse, right? And I'm using this so we can picture what's going on here. So it receives a negative impulse and then it self-regulates and it turns. It truly turns. The wheel will turn and we'll go back to the line. At one point, some of these cars will say, make sure are you okay? And even tells you to it wake up. And it even tells you to take a break, because if it senses that you're going out of the lane so many times, guess what? It will tell you to stop. Take a break. You're falling asleep. There are cases, there are situations, there are programs that it actually can see your eye movement as well if you're falling asleep, right? So all of these things to show that the negative feedback that we're receiving in life, guess what? We ought to learn from them. We can turn into something positive. We can go and self-regulate, right? So it's a beautiful thing that is happening. So with nature in itself, we can learn. So if I feel that something may happen, what can I do? If something has happened in my life, what can I do with that information? Should I just expect that from happening again? Well, it's a choice, right? Each one of us, we can go ahead and take it whichever way we want, right? But stopping our lives and not living our lives the way we're supposed to, or we would like to live our lives, right? It's not the right ideal, right? Or this is another element that I would like to bring here as well, to make not only our lives really miserable, but the life of others around us miserable as well. It's not a good thing, because there is a responsibility behind all of this. But this is so important, folks, that it is addressed in the Spirit's book. Again, the third part of the Spirit's book, chapter 5, the law of preservation. There are two questions that I would like to share with you. Is the self-preservation, question 702, is the self-preservation instinct a law of nature? And the Spirit says, absolutely, all living beings possess it, regardless of their degree of intelligence. In some, it is purely mechanical. In others, it is thought out. We have said this before, and I don't want to, well, let's use a different example. Not us here. When you're about to take off with their airplane, right? Do we feel fearful? Does it cross your mind that something could happen? It crosses my mind. And I love it. I think it's one of the coolest thing in the world, right? To fly, a huge thing like that, right? Full of people inside or cargo, whatever, right? And it takes off, right? Basically, those two amazing engines, sometimes more than two, one on each side, depending on the airplane that you're flying, the thing takes off, right? It's us saying we can do this, right? But there is a study behind. There's also a statistic behind that there are so many flights now going over us right here, and we don't see it happening all the time. We may get now a little bit more of information of airplanes, problems with airplanes, but it's not as often as cars. But then one can also say there are more cars than airplanes. Yes, right? But things are much more safer than it used to be, right? But it crosses our mind. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a possibility. We don't do it often. And many of us may not know the ins and out of an airplane to say everything will be okay, right? Everything is fine. Before the takeoff of an airplane, there are an amazing checkup before it can even get cleared to taxi out of the gate. So there are all of these things that now we're able to reason. As we can see here, for some of us, it's just mechanical. We go because everybody's telling that it's okay for me to go. But some of us will stop and say, you know what? Yeah, it's okay to have that, right? That feeling, right? But we know that somebody's behind this, right? And we hope that those individuals are smart enough that we're here. And we are here to tell the story because many of us have flown before. The second question, 703. What was God's purpose in granting the instinct of self-preservation to all living beings? All beings must collaborate in the designs of providence. That is why God has given them the need to stay alive. Besides, life is necessary for beings to perfect themselves. They sense this instinctively without perceiving it. Once more, we're bringing the idea of self-preservation because sometimes we take this idea of self-preservation and create what? A mess out of it. Oh, I'm too fearful. No, sometimes what we're sensing is the self-preservation. If I do this, I will get hurt. But then we take it to a different level where, you know what? The self-preservation. No, I have to. No, you're just being fearful. Because if it has been presented to you, if the opportunity is presented to you, guess what? We're ready for it. Or we can make ourselves ready for it. Sometimes we think, oh, I have this mission of accomplishing this. No, it presented to you at that moment, and we have a choice. As much as each one of us have our own perception about life, we give value to things differently. We also have the ability to say yay or nay. I will go through with this or not, right? And there is a beautiful example that we were about to see here on this idea. So all of this, again, to give this, I would say, foundation that we can analyze and say, it's okay to fear anything in life, right? Because each one of us, we're on the process of ascending towards God and learning things through different experiences of things that has happened, of things that has not happened as much as we wanted them to happen, but also what will happen and will not happen in the future. We have to acknowledge the what happened, what didn't happen in the past, and what will happen and what may not happen in the future as well, right? As events of our lives. So I would like to share a couple more things here, because we're in the Spiritist Center, number one, and we have this self-preservation side of us that stops us from what? Killing ourselves, taking our lives, being too drastic and too aggressive in certain situations, right? and creating chaos in our lives. And some of us, we still do that, right? So we fear death naturally, even us spiritists. And there's nothing wrong with that, unless if we put a void in our lives, not thinking about what will happen after I lose the physical body. If I were to tell you a story where some individuals, they're already dead, but they fear death, it happens. It happens, right? It's a true case that André Luiz brings in this case in this book right here, The Messengers. There is this a beautiful outpost that they were working at, and they analyzed those individuals who were sleeping, and they are sleeping because they are in a deplorable situation, thinking that they're just in the hospital or they're in that position where they're just there. Never contemplated the idea of one day I will go to the other side, right? The men and women, and this is actually the mentor saying, that believe in eternal life, even while they are still in the physical realm, and even though they may not be Christians per se, are developing faculties of spiritual movement. Here, the movement is not physical, right? But spiritual movement. Where will I be after the physical body? They sleep because they have been magnetized by their own negativistic concept. They remain paralyzed because they prefer narrow-mindedness to understanding. And then we have the case of Cremilda. Cremilda is on the other side in this condition of sleeping, and she's being helped now to wake up on the other side and to understand her condition, that she has lost the physical body and that she's now, quote unquote, just a spirit without the physical body. I don't want to say that she's dead because she's alive. So they bring the husband, and the husband actually talks to her, Cremilda, and she gets scared. She sees the mentor, she sees André Luiz, right? But she thinks that she's in the valley of the dead because she's seeing her husband who had passed several years past, and she's scared. Again, they emphasize the idea that this is how we live, because we have no sense of religious transformation, right? With the help of religion, right? So it's, again, a point for all of us to, as we fear death, it's okay because it's part of our physiology, right? Homeostasis. We want to make sure that we're okay. However, we know, as Benjamin Franklin says, two things that are certain things in our lives. What is it? Death and taxes, right? It's going to happen. It's going to happen, right? I'm joking here, folks. Hopefully you have done your taxes and nobody's going to die anytime soon. Because it's that time of the year. In any case, we want to look at it and say, it's a constant. It's for sure it's going to happen, right? But what am I doing for that when that time comes? So, what about the reverse? Do you think that we go through the same thing, since we're in a spiritist center, when we reincarnate? Does it happen? Do you think it happens? It happens. And there's a beautiful case also on the next book of this amazing series, Missionaries of Light, the case of Adelino, Raquel, and Segismundo. Segismundo is about to reincarnate on chapter 13, entitled Reincarnation, is about to reincarnate, and he's so fearful of what's going to happen. And he starts sending thoughts that are now negative thoughts because he's fearful because of what has happened in the past. Technically, he is reincarnating as the son of Adelino Raquel, whom he in the past killed Adelino and did bad things to Raquel that she then went into a very drastic life. So in the past life, They discarnated in a very difficult way. Him as a murderer. Adelino was killed by Segismundo, and Raquel also, after this whole thing happened, went into prostitution. Right. The preparation of the case is on chapter 12 of telling us of what has happened, right? But then the actual reincarnation, and it's an amazing, a little bit long. Take your time to read this but it is an amazing example of help as well by the mentor Alexandre and the other ones also that are helping in this case. But we see that it's not by chance that sometimes our kids, our siblings, our family members, our co-workers, when we come in contact with them or they come in contact with us, we fear something. We feel something, right? The difficult moments that arrive in our lives, that even though that individual has nothing to do with us in the past, but we are reliving a situation that perhaps in the past I was living with someone else. And I fear. And I target that person saying, oh my gosh, I don't like this person, right? No, this person had nothing to do with you in the past. You were just now dealing with a situation that you have to deal in the past, or that we avoided to do so, right, with this individual now. So we have to analyze things a little bit different. Because the reason I'm saying this is because sometimes we have certain situations at home with one another and whatnot. We say, oh yeah, these, situations from the past. Not necessarily with that individual, right? And we should, as much as we look for the negative inputs, right, in our lives from others, and as much as we read about us, our physical bodies trying to regulate, right, itself, we ought to do the same thing. We have these negative inputs from outside, and we do what? Let me see if I can change this. Let me see if I can transform this into something positive, right? So we have the fear of discarnating. Naturally, even after we discarnate, we still fear death. And then when we have to prepare ourselves to come back, the same thing happens, right? Oh my gosh, I'm going to have to see this again. I'm going to have to do that again, right? But with all of this, we still have help. We still have the amazing help of our mentors as well. I hope that these examples and what we have brought here will give us, again, a foundation for us to see, for us to analyze what Emmanuel will bring to us and make the best use of it. However, we're not going to read it yet. We're going to just touch bases again. Here's the message. Being afraid. And Emmanuel uses, I was afraid, so I hid your talent in the ground. Does anybody remember of what the parable of the talents is? Should we go through it? Okay. We do have time, but not going to go read the whole thing. Actually, a couple passages. We know that this man going on a journey summoned his slaves and entrusted his property to them. To one, he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1. To each, let's pay attention to this, to each according to his ability. To each according to his ability. This is important. So, the first one received the 5 talents. The second one receives the 2 talents, right? And when the master comes back, right, he does what? He takes account from these individuals, right? So the one that received 5 multiplies the 5 talents. And he says the following. When he presents this to the master, he says the following. Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I'll put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. It sounds a little bit harsh, but we have to remember to whom our master was telling this, right? First of all, to us, right? To each one of us, right? But let us digest a little bit more. And the one with the 2 talents, the same thing. The same thing happened. It was presented that he multiplied what he had received and brought 2 more talents back. And I will put in charge of many things towards the end. Enter the joy of your master, right? However, what happens to the third? The third who received 1 talent, right? Then the one who had received the 1 talent also came forward, saying, Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you did not scatter. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master replied, You wicked and lazy slave. You knew, did you, that I reap where I did not sow and gather where I did not scatter. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and on my return I would have received what was mine own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to the one with the 10 talents. For to all those who have, more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. As for this worthless slave, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Again, pretty drastic, right? The words and the way this is treated. But now that we recall the message, we bring the message back, let us take this information with these elements that we brought, right, to each, to their capabilities that they had, right? So if the master said, here's 5, or right, talents, the master already had an idea that he was going to be able to handle 5, right? The one for the 2, the same thing. The one with the 1, he entrusted that, okay, I'm going to give him 1. I'm going to give him a chance to do something, right? So something was given, an opportunity was given, right? A talent or whatever we want to call was given for that individual to try. And I beg to also, when I read this, to think, don't we also think that the one who received 5 and the one who received 2 also felt afraid? There was not a moment in them that, when I go and do whatever I have to do now with these talents, that they didn't feel that, oh my gosh, am I doing the right thing? Right? I dare to say that perhaps the law of preservation did not kick in and say, are you sure about this? Right? Are you sure that this airplane will take off? Right? Maybe so, maybe not. Right? But what is the difference? They did something. And by trying, they accomplished something. Now, what did the third one said? I was afraid. I didn't do a thing. That was the difference. Had him tried something and said, look, I tried to multiply your money or your talent, but something happened on the way, but I tried. Do you think the master would have said something or treated him the same way? Maybe not. These are things for us to think about, right? It's a parable. It's not for us to say, this is how it's going to happen. If you receive 1, you also will hide. No, it's for all of us to make our choices, right? And when we go back and we say, enter this environment of joy, it's because they're already vibrating in the environment of joy, right? They're already hopefully foreseeing that this environment of joy, where this individual, he was already, as he's saying, he was afraid. He knew how tough the master was, right? The man was. And he said, you know what? I'm not going to do anything. He didn't do anything. And this is when Emmanuel comes and brings to us the following. In the parable of talents, the negligent servant attributes his unhappy failure to fear. He had received less potential to realize a profit. He had only one talent accounted to him, and he was afraid of struggling to make it grow. Similar to what happened to the careless servant in the gospel narrative, there are many people who blame their meager resources for not being able to do what they want. So they remain idle and say they are afraid to do anything. And this is a very interesting part that Emmanuel brings to us. Afraid of working, afraid of serving, afraid of making friends, afraid of being a disappointment, afraid of suffering, afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of happiness, afraid of pain. Afraid of working, I'm sorry, in many cases, flat out. And this is Emmanuel saying, we're gonna see it in the next part of it. Flat out laziness, right? Sometimes we put ourselves down as we are applying for a job, as we are or thinking of ourselves in the future, because it's going to be too much work. It's going to be too much responsibility. Well, why we came here for? Why we go to school? Why we read? Why do we study these things? Is to project ourselves at a higher pace, at a higher level. So why are we afraid to do more work? When we learn that through Spiritism that work is not just the physical labor that we have, that we must do, right? But it's every useful what? Action that we have. Joanna de Angelis at the beginning, we read on how we ought to treat others at work. If anything, if we think that we have this or that deplorable job, treat others nicely. You will make a change on that environment, right? And hopefully, not to be expected, others will treat you the same way. So we have an amazing talent when we receive a job, when we have a job to do, right? Afraid of serving, right? Why we're afraid of serving others? Perhaps because if I serve this person's not going to like it, or my way of serving, do it. It's out of heart. The way the other will receive, it's up to them. We will do our part. But before we go into action, we already have this defeat inside of us. Expecting that others, and this is so selfish, expecting that others will recognize our work, right? The way we want to be recognized. Sometimes we receive a recognition, which is a beautiful thing. We send it to God, right? But it's like we want this way, right? We want people to cheer us, to do this or that, right? Afraid of making friends. Why would we be afraid of making friends? As much as we think about it, and sometimes it's like, really? Well, there are individuals that they don't like to make friends. They don't like to spark a conversation. Or if somebody talks to us, we say no. Usually I do that when I'm at the gym. It's my time. Don't talk to me. By the way, I work and live, very close to home. I'm sorry, I work and I go to the gym very close to home. So a lot of people, they know me, so I'm like, oh. But anyways, I talk to people still, and I talk a lot sometimes. But we're afraid to make friends, right? Because we are afraid to disappoint others. Well, we're not perfect. The same way that individual is not perfect either. So if that person expects to have a perfect friend, I'm sorry. Look, it's not going to happen. At least in this condition of planet Earth right now. As we are seeing now, afraid of being a disappointment. One thing goes with the other. Afraid of suffering. It's part of life. It is the negative inputs that we're receiving that we ought to say self-regulation. What can I do with this? It's not easy. It's very difficult. But what can I do with this? How can I not only make my life better in the future, not that we're going to be isolate ourselves somewhere and say, I don't want to have the disappointment, the suffering in my life anymore, right? But to say, I'm going to prepare myself that if it happens again, because it can, right? I will not expect the same thing, right? And I will prepare myself that I will suffer less in the future, right? It's an invitation, folks. Afraid of being misunderstood. How many times we project ourselves towards a situation, right? And people get us completely wrong. I have had several times of that happen to me. I have had people coming back to me and saying, I'm sorry, I thought that you were this type of person, that type of person. I'm like, well, sorry that I presented myself that way to you, because that was that person's perception, right? I have also situations where I expect a little bit more of you. I'm like, sorry that I could not deliver what you were expecting, right? Afraid of happiness. We are afraid of being happy, right? It's that the joke that I made with the words, right? Fearful, happy, right? Or happily fearful, right? Sometimes we just fear that if I'm happy, there's gonna something bad will happen, right? Or in a situation where we look at it and say, if I'm happy, but my cousin, my husband, or my wife, or they're not happy, I want to be next to them. Well, if they're not happy, we need to help them change. But we ought to be happy with what we have, with the talents that we have, right? With the opportunities that we have, right? And afraid of pain. Pain is normal. We talked about it. Let us change. Emmanuel continues by saying, they reach the end of their physical body as human sensitives without having made the least effort to enrich their lives. In life, they fear death. In death, they fear life. And under the pretext of being disfavored by fate, they gradually become champions of uselessness and idleness. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not the one saying, this is Emmanuel. So if you have received a harder task in the world, do not be afraid. Make your way of progress and renewal. No matter how dark the road to which circumstances have led you, and reach it with the light of your effort at doing the good, because being afraid was not an acceptable excuse in the settling accounts between servant and master. Mind you, and Emmanuel used the words again of servant and master. Do you think somebody will be on the other side asking you, what did you do? We gave you this talent, that talent. You may have some helpers, some guidance, but it will be us looking back and saying, yeah, I had that opportunity. Yeah, but I dropped it, right? We will look at ourselves and we'll analyze our conditions. We'll make an account of the things that we received and the opportunities that we did not seize, or at least say, I didn't try. And that is a horrible thing, right? I did not try. I could not hold myself, towards that goal, right? That opportunity, right? It happened. I received one talent, right? It was extremely challenging, but I didn't even try. And that is, I'll make a parenthesis here, because that is the difference between us and when we lovely tend to compare ourselves to others, right? Which is, oh, this person is so successful in this or that area of life, right? We usually do this with physical means, right? Or somebody who is extremely well with time. They are able to manage time so well and they get so much done. It's like, I cannot do this, right? Why? Well, reinvent yourself, reanalyze yourself, right? Maybe this person has a little bit more focus towards certain things that we don't, and we can get that as well. We may not be alike, but it's a point of start, right? And it's the same thing with the larger things in life. So this is the message. This is the message of us being afraid. It's not a matter of the norm that is happening with us in this physical body, us as evolutionary spirits, but also an individual that simply have to try. And I'll finalize this with these three elements here that it's really interesting. In this book, Light Above by Brother X, there is a remembering of this parable, which we brought here before too. And it's really interesting that towards the end, when the servant that only received one talent, it is analyzed again in a different way, and the servant, the master says, "Bad and unfaithful servant, how could you multiply my blessing if you didn't even make the effort to examine it? How can you light the way with the if you keep the lamp off?" He had actually, in this remembrance of the passage, he received enlightenment as the talent. Your idleness has transformed a few grams of beneficial service into several tons of anguish that will henceforth wait upon you. You created ghosts that never existed. You multiplied worries and fears that led you to scream and kick like a simple fool in the advanced circle of works. Finally, you threw the treasure into a swamp of despair and revolt and come to comment on the fear and zeal that my presence instills in you when you were just lazy and foolish. Pain was your sacred and unique opportunity to illuminate your own path so that your clarity could support your companions in the regenerative and healthy struggle. You rejected the gift I entrusted to you. Return therefore to the shadow and despair that you embraced. And the servant who had lost his way due to improvidence and nonconformity only understood the sublime value of the lamp of suffering when he found himself alone and helpless in our darkness. Why do we bring this? Because the moment that we decide that I will do nothing, I am fearful, there are not only consequences for us, but for those around us. Because if we have that talent and we multiply it, for sure there will people watch. They'll be watching us. And they may utilize that as an example, the same way that if we don't do anything, we're also multiplying the same idea. I'm going to hide it. Our kids, our family members, right? So there are consequences for the good examples of life, and there are consequences for the negative examples of life. Joanna de Angelis mentions this in one of her passages as well, saying that we are, right, writing our future and responsible for others as well. So it is important for us to analyze, and I'll finalize with this. Mentor Alexandre, as we were rereading this book again and preparing for this passage, this beautiful sentence came about. And I was like, did I read that before? As usual, when we read a book, right? Those who do what they can receive the salary of peace. It's not like we will receive a salary, something is going to be on our account or something. But if our minds, our hearts, at the end of the day, we can say, I did what I could. Our conscience is going to say, here's your payment. Go to sleep. Right? Go to sleep well. It's a simple thing. But if we just say, I'm going to try my best. We received the task. It's so far ahead of us. It's like, oh my gosh, so overwhelming, right? When we're dealing with family, when we're dealing with work, when we're dealing with the Spirit Center, the things of life in general, taxes now again coming up. And we do what? No, we keep going. Do with what you can. Do what you can. And we will receive the salary of peace. Joanna de Angelis, to finalize, says the following. on the same book, on the same message towards the end, Jesus culminating the task of building happiness and peace in lukewarm human hearts, overwhelmed by the infamous follies on both sides of life. Innocent and pure, neither feared nor was distressed, teaching us how our attitude should be in relation to what happens to us and what we need to achieve inner glorification. And this is a final element here that I would like to highlight: both sides of life. We are in a spiritist center, bringing a spiritualist ideal to all of us when we read the parable, when we read these things, that we are connecting mind and heart with all these, with one of us here, right? With all of us here, as well as those who are on the other side. They're looking at us, right? And saying, can we do this together, right? Or there are those as well who connect with us when we short ourselves and saying, oh, no, I'm not up to this task. It's really difficult today. Or it's difficult for me to go ahead and accomplish this. Let me hide this talent. So that is the message. When we look at the wars, when we look at the struggles of life around the world, and we are incapable of doing anything, right? Because of how small we are, thank God, because sometimes if we had the power to do so, we would probably be making more mess around the world. We look at it and say, let me go back to my little world, the environment around me, and say, can I make it better? At least here. And hopefully the same thing will be next door, and then a town, a state, this nation, hopefully, will be changed as we would like to be changed, right? So let us not fear. There are many things that can happen, right, in the future. And the way we project ourselves towards it is a combination of things, combination of feelings, ideas that we receive from the past in this lifetime and perhaps the previous ones as well. Why we are nowadays with this beautiful talent called Spiritism, or analyzing spirituality in a different way, right? Religion in a different way, right? We don't know. But this is what we have in our hand. Talking to Dione the other day, we were talking about something, and we asked if so and so, at work, that a mutual friend was a spiritist or not, and we were discussing this idea of we don't have to say we're spiritists, right? We don't have to say, oh, I'm a spiritist, I go to the spiritist. It's how we present ourselves towards others, right? It's how when we look at a situation where somebody brings a situation to us, we say, they shall pass. There will be a tomorrow, right? The worst that can happen is that we'll discarnate, but we'll go on, right? For those, obviously, that we can say such a thing. I'm joking, but the idea is to multiply life, right? Not fear. And let us not trouble ourselves, as Joanna said earlier today, whatever there may be out there, right? Because it's just a waste of time. And I'm saying this to myself because at the end of the day, we were the ones who received this message at home, not only once, but twice, right? And we say, in order for us to really grasp it, let us present it, right? Let us bring this comfort that Emmanuel brings to us and help us move on with our lives. On that note, I thank you for this moment to bring this to you and to share this moment with you as we start this amazing month of March. Pretty soon it's going to be spring, and the flowers will be blooming and all the beautiful things, right? Amen. We would like to open up for some questions, comments that you may have, if any. Daniel, anything online?
We have a comment from Paula. It's not a question, but I'm going to read to you. But before I read, I wanted to ask my question. So when you came up with the topic, when I read, of course, it's a question, right? Uh, are you happily fearful or fearfully happy? So, because as a question, the first tendency is for us to answer the question, right? Of course, I answered the question myself. I said both. That's what my answer, right? I think in the level that we are, we experience both, right? Sometimes we are happily fearful, sometimes we are fearfully happy. I guess the question, and I, after see your presentation and all the examples you brought from the gospel, from the books, the spiritist books, um, what make the difference is which one out-age the other one, right? So as long as we are moving forward, it is okay to have those emotions, right? Because this is emotion, right? Um, that at some moment we fear that something is going to happen, but we don't get stuck. The problem lies when we get stuck, when it becomes chronic, either too fearful or too happily, right? Because happiness is something that is not from this world. Jesus uh, said that, right? And we learned that. So it's more a comment, it's not a question to you, but I you can comment on that if you agree with this, the answer that I had in my mind based on what you have studied. So do we leave this both situation, right?
At the level that we are, for sure, we will experience both, and there's nothing wrong with that. That is the main thing. I think that the divider here is complacency, right? To live a life where it's okay, right? It's okay to be fearful. It's okay not to take the next step, right? As well as Daniel also mentioned, is for us to live in this in the idea of denial, right? Oh, no, I'm gonna do this. Everything's fine, and no, we have to be cautious, right, with our talents, right? Because at the same time that those that receives more talents than us, as we see in the parables, right? They've received the 5 talents, right? They they have to think as well, and we see that self-preservation for some of us is just automatically. Some of us, it's well thought out. It's something that we stop and we weigh the possible consequences, because we're not able to foresee the future. When someone makes a projection or in a company for growth, they're looking at certain elements that are non-negotiables. Some are elements that we don't know what's going to happen to the economy, right? So we also have to take precautions, to kind of make up for that, right? What's going to happen to the market? What's going to happen for what's happening and what will happen with those that are consuming the products that I am, or the service that I'm producing. So there is a projection. It's not just, oh, I'm going to create this and put out there. No, there is a projection. There is a lot of work being done before something like that happens. So I think the same thing should be in our lives, right? There's got to be this idea of, how can what may happen if I make this decision, right? Should I slow down now? Should I be a little bit more aggressive? So I'm glad that you brought this, Daniel, so that we can look at the ideas and say, yes, sometimes I am comfortable here, but what can I do to move a little bit, to move the bar, right? And sometimes we also ought to say, you know what, I did this because right now it's not the right moment. But if we made the decision, guess what? Chances are that we thought about it, right? We gave a chance to it, right? For sure, the multiplication of talents is not by chance. They went and they suffered. They had to work hard. And that is what we are afraid of, right? To multiply them, to go to work. So thank you for the comment. Hopefully that helps as well.
Any question here? Alba?
Thank you, Leito. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Ah, That's why I put two clowns. Okay. Thank you for this is like a tapestry that you created with the different books and the texts and your experience as well. So thank you. It was a beautiful presentation, awakening presentation. I don't know if the readings that you did at some point, did you learn something about how to stop these thoughts of fear? Especially nowadays, we have a plethora of experiences in the world that they are increasing this emotion and thoughts of fear, right? We have plenty of wars, we have political situations, we have economical situations. It's a whole of things because of the planetary transition. So yes, it is okay to be afraid, like, oh, okay, what is going on? But when you start in that loop and continue, how to stop that? Did you learn something about it?
Well, very easy. I mean, it's Joanna de Angelis is adamant about it. It comes, it's natural, right? The idea of fear is, as we have seen here, is natural. We want to be at a constant. We want to be relaxed, right? We don't want to lift the weights, right? Because the body is going to shocks, right? Breaking the fibers, right? We don't want to do that. So naturally, we will be worried about what's going to happen tomorrow, right? Will I have something to eat? And we have this in the gospel as well. Jesus reminding us, if the birds will have what to eat, we will also have what to eat, right? So it's natural that these things happen, and then the worry comes. What we need to do is to replace it. How we replace it is hard because we're so focused, we're so into the negative things, right? That we don't even look at something positive, something different, right? We don't give a chance for somebody to say, but what if you try this, that way, or this way, right? Because the way you're doing is for sure not giving you any positive outcomes, right? Remembering, taking the input and making something out of it, not keeping them to yourself and multiplying the negative, right? So changing the perspective is number one. What I would also add onto this as well, because it is also at a physiological, it affects us our physical as well, is to change the environment. Do something physically. Go and do something physically, meaning go for a walk, go change, go do breathing meditation, right? Because again, this will change the environment. Sometimes we have to dive within and saying, okay, I'm going to change it somewhere, right? Especially for some of us that when we feel fearful, blood pressure goes up, right? We start ventilating and we're like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? It has happened to me, right? That we're like, what is this, right? What is this coming from? And I also like to think that lately reading about, for example, the great minds that we have seen on planet Earth, right? Chico Xavier, Saint Francis of Assisi, Mother Teresa. Did they think about wars? They did. Did they watch the news? They did, right? But one thing that they did not lose control of, their environment, their surroundings. Well, they were troubled. I would like to say that they also felt something because they were here on planet Earth with us. They have a heart for sure. So they felt something. So they, even though they had inner peace, but they also felt that anguish, right? That fear. But they never forgot the environment around them. So it's beautiful to think that, when I say beautiful, because we have all this technology, showing us what's happening around the world, right? And all the wars and all those things. Like in the past, we had to wait for the newspapers the next day or a week later for us to receive it and read what's going on, right? Or listen to the radio right next to us and, oh, what's going on? Now it's right there, right? And we were attached to it. They had the capability to do the same thing, right? Much less fast or very, very slowly, but they had they knew the problems of the world. right? But they never forgot their surroundings. So if I'm worried about if this is what we have, this is the talent that we have received, not to be someone in the United Nations, right, that deals with that. This is our United Nations over here, right? This is my family. This is my clan. And I'm not saying to be selfish. This is the Spiritist Center. This is the congregation that I go, this is my job. I'm going to be positive here. What's happening somewhere else, I don't have a saying. Have no control. So I think those three elements, praying is beautiful. It will get there for sure. I am a huge believer of it. But if we're not changing the environment around us, or if we're not persistent with the environment around us, guess what? We're going to continue to be stuck in there, right? And to me, and I'm glad that you're saying this, because this is one of the differences that we have with these higher minds. They continue on. Yes, there is a war. Yes, there is pain. But have I diminished the pain of that person who is right next to me? Right? So I think that would be the three elements that I would add to that. And thank you for the question. Daniel, and I think Johnny said first.
Yeah, you basically, you said all that I was gonna mention, but what the way I see the situation is the awareness, because we don't have the control on others, but we have the control on us. So the substituting of problems, the prayer, and also I always like to say about Godinho, because one time I asked him about that, and he said, Gione, remember that we didn't have the internet, and the news from another part of the world would take half a year to come to us. So the problems were still there, but we didn't know. And we just had a small surroundings awareness, right? And nowadays we know so much that we are even more afraid. And then when you are afraid, you paralyze. And if you are not vigilant, you are going to be so much more afraid, because the more you know, the more my God, how it's going to be. And sometimes you misunderstood. Sometimes you didn't know the whole truth. Sometimes, so we have to have the awareness and say, wait a minute. So I think you said it all, and also what is important about the guy that put the coin there, that what means, did he want to save the coin? Yes, because of fear. However, the idea is do it.
Exactly.
Be afraid.
It's interesting that it's interesting that you say this, Johnny. Just a short comment, because so we can pass it on to Jeanette as well. Forgive me if I believe it was also Alexandre who said in the book, we will not suffer the from others, meaning the how others affect us, once we have self-control. So the influence of others will not influence me, will not affect me, once I develop self-control. So self-control. So people say, I go to this place, nothing happens to me. It does, because you do not have self-control. I look at that piece of chocolate cake, guess what? I have no self-control. So if I see it, it will influence me and I will want to eat. So don't tell me that you have self-control, because you do not have self-control. But remember, self-control. So Jeanette, go ahead.
It's just very, very fast and simple. I learned here, if you cannot take the fear of your mind, have a plan B, plan C, plan D, plan D.
Oh, you're talking too much with Daniel with the plan B there, but that is correct. Yes. Daniel, I think Paula wants to say something so we can close with our prayer.
Yeah, I just want to read her comment. She put it here, kind of like steps to do this in a conscious way. From Conscious Construction of the Soul by Katie Ann. So this writer, she says, process to release fear. 1, be aware I am in it. 2, realize needs to change thoughts. 3, patience with self and others. 4, catch the fear and release 2. And then she continues from part 2. Part 2, she said, your mentor or angel. Oh, release it to your mentor or angel. It's continuation. And she finalized by saying, unveiling fear is a key to our evolution. Worry is the misuse of the soul's gift of imagination. Thanks, Leo, for presenting this important topic. That's her comment.
Thank you, Paula, for the comment. And it is true. And a lot of these things, it's nice to summarize that way for us to project ourselves into the futures, right? So we hope that we can take this message with us, and and this guidance that Emmanuel brings to us, Joanna De Angelis. We also hope that we go back and we read the books, the passages that we mentioned here, because I am certain that this will also enlighten your lives throughout this turmoil moments that we have, right? And as Alba mentioned, what to do. This also is a way for us to shift out of fear and put ourselves into something else that is way bigger than ourselves, and it's way much bigger than the issues that we're seeing on earth right now. Not that they're not important, but the idea of service certainly much bigger than all of this. So we thank you for this moment, and we'll pass to the second part of our meeting tonight.